Hello and welcome to FFRF's Ask an Atheist. I'm Chris Line, legal counsel for the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and this week we're taking a look at the current state of bills across the country that blur the lines between religion and government. Joining me in studio is Ryan Dudley, our state policy manager.
Hey Chris, good to be here.
And joining us remotely is our regional governmental affairs manager, Mickey Dollens. Hey Mickey.
Hey Chris, hey Ryan.
Hey Mickey.
As always, we want to hear your thoughts on the topics we're discussing today. So please leave your questions in the chat below or email them to askanatheist@ffrf.org. We'll try our best to answer your questions live during the show. So let's get into it. We track a ton of bills at FFRF, and as of last week, we're opposing 280 bills that are making their way through the legislature.
Yeah, so let's take a look at some of that data. Our legislative arm, the FFRF Action Fund, provides a full list of all the bills we're opposing. So we have a heat map here that shows where these bills are located. So as you can see, obviously, the darker bills are the darker states are some areas that we are really focused on right now that are really pushing some real theocratic bills. So Texas and Missouri are heavy right now.
So I gotta ask you, so does this also, is that impacted by when legislators are in session, I assume?
Yeah.
I say that only because I noticed, if you pull the map back up, I noticed that Arkansas and Louisiana, very, very non-problem areas. You have like Texas, Missouri, and obviously we expect, the South and sort of your North Dakota, South Dakota areas. So just wanted to reference that, obviously that, as you said, is because of when legislators are in session, not necessarily that like, Arkansas and Louisiana just aren't doing anything problematic right now.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to give Arkansas and Louisiana a break yet on being theocratic governments. But one thing I will say about Texas, and I want to pass it to Mickey here because he's been doing a lot of our work in Texas, is they meet every other year on odd years. So 2025, they were last in 2023. So you're going to see a bunch of theocratic bills running through there just in groups. So Mickey, do you have any comment on kind of what you're seeing down there?
Yeah, well, you can tell from that heat map that just about every state in the union is in some way affected by laws that are rooted in Christian nationalism. When we take a look at some of the bigger states like Texas, currently right now the big push is to privatize public education. They want to take public funds and divert it into private schools where the majority of people who go there are from affluent families. Now, it's important to remember that this has been attempted 6 times under Governor Greg Abbott, and every time the Democrats and the rural Republicans have banded together to defeat the voucher bills. But this time, there is so much money that is being poured into challenging Republican legislators who dissent and who try to go back. So I know the pressure is really high and the stakes are on the line. We're looking at $1 billion voucher bill, particularly House Bills 2 and 3, which will be considered for a public hearing on March 11th. I know there's a lot of people in Austin who are planning to go to the Capitol to use their voice to make their issues known and hopefully get through to lawmakers to let them know that this is nothing but a scam and it hurts our students who the majority of attend public schools. So what we're seeing right now in Texas is primarily the big focus is on passing this private school voucher bill.
And did I see, was it the 10 Commandments that passed the Texas Senate yesterday? Was it the Senate?
So it did not. So a vote was taken in the House yesterday because I went to look this morning, and a vote was taken on the Texas 10 Commandments bill in committee. I don't know what the vote was, but I think kind of going back to what Mickey was saying, their big push is to privatize education so they can send public dollars to private, often religious schools. If they can't really do that, or even if they can do that, another thing that they're trying to do is bring religion to public schools. And they're doing that in a couple ways. One of the first ways, the 10 Commandments bill that we talked about. So
there's 2, right? So I just bring it, so that's a fun thing.
Yes, that is a good point. There are 2 different versions. There are seemingly a bunch of them throughout the country, but 2 different versions in Texas, which have 2 different sets of 10 Commandments, which is really interesting. So on Senate Bill 10, which was heard in committee yesterday, it's likely going to pass at least that committee in the Senate, and it'll go from there. But I thought there were a couple interesting points that that were made, that the bill sponsor made. He made, with no uncertain terms, under no uncertain terms, that he expects the bill to pass, it to go up to the courts, there to be a preliminary injunction, and he wants it to go to the Supreme Court so they can overturn Stone v. Graham. That's what they're seeking to do with this legislation specifically. So
what was the other bill in Texas yesterday?
To allow prayer. So there's another bill. Is this the one you're talking about? Senate Bill 11 was also heard in that committee yesterday in the Senate, and that is to allow a period for during the day of instruction for prayer and reading of religious texts.
Okay, I bring that up because as you had shared with the staff here at FFRF, there was a special guest that showed up in the legislature yesterday advocating for the bill. Coach Joe Kennedy showed up for, I believe he was going after that bill because the press release I saw was calling it like Coach Kennedy's bill or something like that. So I knew it had to have something to do with like imposing prayer or something in school. So the coach who, just wanted to be a praying football coach and had no, ill intentions about trying to impose his religion on students or anything, is now testifying or going to the Texas legislature to push for a bill to push religion onto students. So weird. I guess it wasn't a coincidence, and maybe the Supreme Court made a slight mistake in that case. So
it was rich, and I actually got to watch this because I think Mickey was in committee and doing his legislative duties yesterday, so I was able to watch this Texas Senate hearing, and it was rich. I mean, he just sat down. He's like, I'm just this poor coach, and all I wanted to do was stand up for the fellow Americans and do what's right. And there's this very clear, driving force. There's something behind it. He's going around the country doing exactly this, pushing his agenda.
How long do you keep doing that before you become a lobbyist? Like, how long do you keep being, 20 years from now, is he going to be testifying on why we need to have prayer in school and be like, I'm just a football coach who's now been on a 20-year break after I quit my football team to pursue pushing religion on students full time.
Along those lines, I was going to say that playing the victim, airing grievance is a common tactic that Christian nationalists, religious extremists use to justify why their bills should be heard. We were talking about the display of the Ten Commandments in public schools. That's one of the top bills that we're tracking. We're actually tracking 29 pieces of legislation that require some type of religious display in schools. And a lot of times they justify displaying a Ten Commandment in a classroom based on historical context. But as Dudley mentioned earlier, there is discrepancy in many of these bills on exactly which Ten Commandments poster goes up. So while one denomination of Christianity may agree with this version of what it says specifically on when some of these require the use of the word donkey, for example, and then someone from Judaism wants a different version of their Ten Commandments, now you start to see the conflict. And in my experience, when I've brought these discrepancies up, after all, they're supposed to be historical. So we should have some reasonable expectation of historical accuracy. But on the meanwhile, there's very different interpretations of the verbiage in these Ten Commandments. It starts to make them think about, well, while I interpret the Ten Commandments being this way, my fellow lawmaker who is on the same, Republican side thinks it should be this way. And then all of a sudden you have these fractures within caucuses, and then they decide sometimes to just leave it alone because there's not a consensus on exactly what this, quote, historical document should say, especially when you're talking about presenting it in front of children as early as kindergarten.
Yeah, and as we've seen the Supreme Court flip-flop on this issue, going from protecting the separation of church and state to completely eviscerating it, we're now seeing that expansion, as you noted, throughout the entire country. I mean, at first, we just had a few. I know in the past, Texas has tried a few times at that Ten Commandments bill. Louisiana finally last year passed it, and obviously FFRF is involved in a lawsuit over that. But even while that lawsuit's going on, as you noted, 29 other states or whatever are going ahead with this. So it's kind of caught on that and that these states are going to push this, even though it is, as we noted, blatantly unconstitutional. Like, there is a court case directly on point saying this is unconstitutional. And like you noted, they have plans across the country to just challenge this and try to get the Supreme Court to overturn it. And, I'm not convinced that they won't. So it's not looking great. But we can actually go through a breakdown. As Mickey noted, as you can see, public schools are by far the biggest target for these bad bills, standing at 78 as of February 19th. Other highly challenged areas include religious liberty protection, school vouchers, reproductive rights, and abortion.
Yeah, so while looking at that graphic, as Mickey was saying, as he started out saying, it's more than just putting the Ten Commandments in schools. It's them literally attacking the secular institution that public schools must operate under, right? Like in various ways. So it's vouchers, Ten Commandments, chaplains in schools, things of that nature all fall
book
under
bans,
the guys. Book bans.
Deciding curriculum changes, deciding what can be included or not included in school curriculums.
Yeah. Mickey, do you have anything to add to the public schools area? What are you seeing in some of the states that you're tracking?
Well, when we're seeing these symbolic gestures, it's a way for Christian nationalists to normalize Christian supremacy in state government. Once your state is branded as a kingship of Jesus Christ, and that's the way that you're presenting it to little kids, and then they're impressionable, they believe that, then they're much more likely to go along with the actual theocratic legislation that affects people's day-to-day lives, such as abortion bans and that type of thing. So these symbolic gestures, while some people may say, yeah, there's nothing wrong with the Ten Commandments on public school classrooms, or what does it hurt to have unqualified chaplains in schools? It's what it is it's getting young people who are very impressionable, familiar and comfortable around these symbolic, empty gestures, but then it makes their agenda of passing anti-constitutional, unpatriotic, un-American legislation going forward that much easier.
I think that's such a good point, and that's exactly what they did with the In God We Trust, right? It's our national motto. What harm is it? We're showing patriotism and putting it up. They'll pass it off as ceremonial deism, and now all of a sudden they're rooting their theocratic agenda in just that, and saying, I heard it during the Ten Commandments arguments yesterday. It was like, we have In God We Trust in the Capitol. We have it on our money. Obviously there's a whole other argument to that about when that came in the money and how it came about on the money and all that stuff. But I think Mickey brings up a really good point. They are using these ceremonial gestures as footing to establish more of a theocratic agenda.
Right, and then moving beyond ceremonialism, I think that's what we heard a lot in the past was like, oh, Ten Commandments is historical, that's why we want to do it. But I know Timothy Barton, David Barton's son, has been going around saying his big line that he has is, so we'll arrest kids for violating the Ten Commandments, but we won't teach it to them in the classroom or whatever. And then he'll say, thou shalt not kill, we'll arrest a kid if they kill. Thou shalt not steal, we'll arrest you for stealing. And then he just kind of trails off because those are the only two commandments that we actually have codified in our law.
Yeah.
Even things that we would agree with on the Ten Commandments, like lying, is bad, but we certainly don't arrest people for it. Otherwise, our whole government would be arrested probably.
Yeah.
So and then obviously there's a ton of things in there that just could never be laws in our country, like the First Amendment. First commandment.
Yeah. I mean, he dropped that piece of wisdom yesterday, and I just had to laugh in my office. Like, what are you talking about? Like, obviously we're going to arrest people for killing. Are we going to arrest people, though? My question would be for having a God different than another God, right? Like, every time that they run one of these Ten Commandments bills, everything I hear from the people who are proponents of these bills is like, what, do you not agree with some of these commandments? Do you not agree that we shouldn't kill, steal, lie, all that stuff? Of course, that's not the issue. The issue is the underlying, premise of it is like, we shall not have another God other than the Christian God. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and obviously just a terrible argument in general. Just like imagine if you're trying to say, look, this is clearly historic. Like our law must be based off of it because look, 20% of it can be found in our law. How could it not be clear that this is the foundation of this? That 20%, that you can actually trace over and that we know was actually punished in other societies that were not following Judeo-Christian heritage. So
yeah,
just pretty ridiculous.
My response to that is if someone's moral compass is directed by ancient texts and scrolls from tens of thousands of years ago, then they have bigger issues than displaying posters in public school classrooms. Religious morality is not dependent on any particular religious beliefs. It was advantageous to us as a human species to practice empathy and have set order. Otherwise, we would quite likely go extinct like our Neanderthal cousins.
Right, of course, and we just see that all the time. I mean, basically every position, there are Christians who take basically every position, pro-LGBT, anti-LGBT, then they use the Bible to justify each one. So religion is really just, your morality is yours, and then you can use your religion to kind of ad hoc, post hoc justify it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the areas or what the broader groupings of laws that we're seeing across the country.
Yeah, so another area where we're seeing some movement as far as in states is the chaplain bills. So actually Texas was one of the first, if not, I think the first to pass a chaplain bill in 2023, so their last legislative session. And what this does, just largely speaking, because some of the bills kind of offer a different, reading of it, but what the Texas bill does is it requires school districts to take a vote on a policy to adopt to accept chaplains either as volunteers or as paid staff. And this is all under the guise of, hey, there's a social work shortage, so we should have chaplains filling in for social workers. Mickey, what do you say about that, or what are you seeing on the ground in the states that you're tracking, and any other insight?
Yeah, I've been following this same bill in Missouri, and shout out to Senator Nirenberg from the Missouri Senate. It really helps when legislators read the bills, because oftentimes the people presenting them don't even know the content that's within the legislation that they're trying to pass. And so Senator Nirenberg brought up the fact that there's no type of standards or background. Well, there's a background check, but there's no type of accreditation or anything like that to show that these are credible people who are going to be working with youth in our schools. And the bill's author just threw out something crazy, like there's in the bill, it's mandated 80 hours of training. And Senator Nirenberg, having read the bill, said, Senator, will you please point to me in the bill where that is listed? And he couldn't. And so it's a great lesson in that when if you're a legislator or if you're a citizen lobbyist who's going to the Capitol or calling your legislature to effect change, if you read the bill, you're probably already ahead of the author and most of their colleagues. And next week, we're going to have a whole session, a whole show on how to effectively lobby your legislators and how to get your voice heard through the noise. And I'm going to lay out a framework to teach people exactly how to do that. But also, I will say when it comes to the chaplain bills, and like most bills that are rooted in theocratic legislation, it somehow funnels public dollars to someone in the private industry. And in this case, that's exactly the case. If you want to be an accredited school chaplain, there's a fellow that you can go to. I don't know if I can mention his name, but if you want to Google him, his name's Rocky Malloy. And for $1,000, you can become a school chaplain, and then you can keep your membership for only $25 a month. And then you can go into schools and be this accredited school chaplain. But the problem is we don't need school chaplains. We need trained mental health professionals. I always hear from people across the aisle that in the event of a tragedy such as a school shooting, it's never the guns, it's about mental health. We need to invest in mental health. And then when given the opportunity to invest in trained mental health professionals and to retain the ones that we already have, the appropriations never go there. They're never investing in retaining those great mental health professionals and attracting new ones. They want to delegate core government services to either the church or nonprofit sector. And as a result, we continue to have kids in school who suffer from mental health issues. And so I feel like it's at the end of the day, there is a profit motive behind the designers who architect these bills, but then they dupe a lot of well-meaning legislators who believe that they're doing the right thing by presenting this information. And in fact, many times they'll present wrong information on the floor. And this experience happened last year where I showed the author that the information they were citing on the floor at the bottom in fine print, it said these are anecdotal and not to be taken literal. And so we hear things like, you guys probably heard things like this before, that in schools where there's chaplains, there's 0 suicides. Mental health drastically drops. Like these are things that are unfounded, and they're talking points for good, well-meaning legislators that unfortunately get duped by the charlatans who are trying to cipher taxpayer dollars into their own pockets.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. That you mentioned Rocky Malloy and the chaplain group. So as you noted, like a lot of these bills are just being sent to every state. So that's why you're going to notice if you look through our tracking of bills and stuff, that a lot of the bills are word for word the same in different states because there's groups out there that are pushing these bills. And that also explains, for Mickey's point, why a lot of times the legislators don't know about the bills, because they just have these people and they're just like, oh, you're going to hand me my school chaplain bill, I'll introduce it exactly as you've written it, and then we'll go from there. But
and I know we have to move on, but I wanted to address a couple things. And Mickey, I thought you brought up a lot of good points, to include there are well-meaning legislators who are just being duped by this. And Rocky Malloy, I have a note here, considers himself, what's he call himself, a drug smuggling pirate, a former drug smuggling pirate. He has this whole story. But he also has on the National School Chaplains Association website, he had to scrub it clean of the actual intent of the chaplain bill, and that was to bring Jesus to public school students. When he ran this bill in Texas, he had to scrub that website clean because legislators knew that it wasn't going to pass muster if he kept that on there. So now they're trying to pass it off as, look, we have this shortage of social workers, let's do it in this way. When I think Rocky Malloy has kind of told us his actual intention.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people have done that. I mean, back years ago, there's been such a sea change, because at first the bills would pretend to be secular or have some purpose like that, and now people are just being blatant. For example, we can now next talk about in West Virginia, they have a bill that would have the state of West Virginia recognize the Holy Bible, complete with 66 books of the Old and New Testament, as the divinely inspired, inerrant, foundational document for our society and government, an accurate historical record of human and natural history, and the utmost authority for human moral behavior. The bill says, as such, the Holy Bible and its precepts shall be given a place of prominence and reverence in the public buildings, laws, policies, and schools of the state of West Virginia. So, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. West Virginia wants to declare itself a Christian state and basically lie and say that the Bible is foundational there, and sort of imply that everyone there should adhere to the Bible. So very scary stuff.
I was actually looking up the definition of an Establishment Clause violation. It gave me this exact bill. I mean, there's nothing more clearly in violation of the Establishment Clause than this bill. It is just absolutely egregious.
Yeah, I guess call me old-fashioned, but I remember the days when the foundational document of our society and government was the U.S. Constitution. And that's the way it should be. We already have a foundational document of this nation, and we're very special because that's why this nation was one of the reasons why it was born. And also in the bill, I did read that it has to be the Protestant version of the Bible. Why not the English version? Oh, wait, I know why. Because we left the English monarchy to get away from religious control. So this bill is just easy to debate. I hope it gets beat up in the legislature. And also considering that in West Virginia, 64% of the people identify as Christian. So let's say out of those 64%, 20% are religious extremists or Christian nationalists. That means out of the entire population of West Virginia, only 12.8% are reasonably said to be Christian nationalists. Now, remember, this is a House joint resolution, so it will go to the vote of the people. And this is a great thing about direct democracy, is that even in states like Oklahoma, when given the opportunity to vote on separating church and state, prohibiting public funds from going to church activities and purposes, even in states like West Virginia and Oklahoma, the people uphold the constitutional principle of the separation of church and state. And seeing how approximately only 12% of people in West Virginia are likely Christian nationalists, I think this has a good chance of failing if it goes to the vote of the people.
Yeah, and that's something good to point out that can have some positive here for us, Mickey, that most of these bills that we're talking about are probably going to fail this year still, which is good. The vast majority. The problem is we have so many bills that are so bad, even the few, just having a few pass is very problematic for the country. We have another bill we could talk about in Alabama, where we were warning about school-sponsored prayers being brought back in Alabama. They want to force public school students to start each day with prayer. Another thing that has been directly struck down by the Supreme Court, and no doubt, just like the Ten Commandments bills, the lawmakers are hoping to pass it in order to have it be challenged, take it up to the Supreme Court, and have the Supreme Court declare that the state of Alabama can force prayer onto students in schools again, as was stopped many decades ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have probably a better handle on the legal footing than I do. But this just seems, again, like the West Virginia bill to be
Yeah, I mean,
unconstitutional, right? Like is there much of a debate here?
No, there's not, and there's no question, that this is meant to, because as we note all the time, students are free to pray in school. You can pray to yourself. Students even could get together in a small group of friends if they all wanted to pray. They can do that. But the problem is you can't have school-sponsored prayer in school, and that's what they want. But obviously they always couch it as, oh, we want to bring back prayer in school. And it's like, well, prayer never left school. Students have the same religious freedom rights as all of us. What they want is teachers leading prayer over the loudspeaker, to require kids to pray who might not otherwise be praying. And also, as Mickey noted earlier, the symbolism of it, so that, if you are a kid who's not religious, you're not wanting to partake in the Christian prayer, maybe you start to feel compelled a little bit to join. Maybe you got to pretend for your friends, you want to fit in, so you have to acquiesce and just pretend that you're a Christian and joining in on the prayer. And, they're completely fine with that. They would love to force kids to give up their real religious freedom rights and just join in with what they think should be the religion for everyone. So hopefully that'll be defeated there. I think we have some other bills.
Real quick on that bill, I was going to say the strategy behind these bills is foundationally public or peer pressure amongst young people and their peers. Take a released time, for example. There's a company called LifeWise, again, making money, right, where they will bus kids across the street to a makeshift church or even an actual church, give them right-wing theology instruction, and then say, here's a bunch of cookies and juice and fun times, and tell your friends all about it. And then they go back to school, they spread the word, and next thing you know, you've got kids pressuring and then asking their parents, will you please let me get out of music, art, or PE to go play games. There was a documentary on this where they get to throw rocks at a poster of Goliath. And so it looks like a fun thing for kids. But again, a lot of that is rooted in public pressure. And having taught in a public school, every morning there's a moment of silence, and kids could use that to reflect, pray, meditate, sit quietly. And so, as to Chris's point, prayer never left school. Kids can bring their Quran, their Bible to school. You can have groups as long as it's student-led and initiated and not pressured by the school. So there's a lot of religious freedom in the school. However, the opposite of religious freedom are bills like this that dictate a specific religion on those kids who don't subscribe to that particular faith. And that is the constitutional issue that we're worried about right now. That is the un-American, unpatriotic, anti-freedom of speech and freedom of religion issue that we're trying to solve. And we're doing a great job. Legal staff at FFRF has fought bad bills across the country. I know that Ryan Dudley has had a lot of success in beating bad bills in Oklahoma. And so for everyone listening, it sounds like doom and gloom, but organizations like Freedom from Religion Foundation, the largest free thought organization in the country, is making incredible progress in defeating this anti-constitutional legislation and upholding freedom of religion for all people.
Well, thank you, Mickey. We appreciate that. We'll talk about one more specific state, and then we'll move on to questions. The particular state we're talking about is Idaho, which is trying to force Bible readings in school. This is actually a really unique form of a Bible reading bill that I've actually never seen before this year. So what this would do is it would have students read a small portion of the Bible each day for 10 years. So they would end up reading the entire Bible. Which is kind of interesting, because my understanding is most Christians read 0.5% of the Bible, just the same verses over and over, the same, the money-making ones, the ones that really sound good and give a good message. There's a lot of there is some evil stuff in the Bible, but even more so, it's just boring. I feel like 70% of the Bible has got to be so boring and just not pertaining to anything.
Yeah, I was writing testimony on this, and somewhat tongue-in-cheek was like, oh, we should support this bill, right? Because there's a I'm going to mess up the quote, and I can't remember who it's by, but it's the road to atheism is littered with Bibles read cover to cover. So I was like, yeah, have them read the Bible. That's more for FFRF. That's more members. That's more people who look at religion and Christianity for exactly what it is, and not just cherry picking, the cute little verses. But obviously, this is problematic, and I would never support such a thing. But
like you noted, though, at least in this case, they would see the good, the bad, and the boring, and they would have a fuller understanding. But that doesn't take away from what the clear purpose of the bill is. Why are we reading the entire Bible and not the entire Quran? Or why is it the Bible? Because that's what they want kids to learn. So that's very clear.
But I'd like to bring up the issue of parental right violations. As a father to a 5 and 6 year old, daughters in daycare, sons in public schools, I don't want the government teaching my kids what to believe. And so for those parents out there who have kids in schools like Oklahoma or West Virginia, where they're trying to indoctrinate on a specific religion, it's not the study of religion, it's how to religion. There are things that we as parents can do to help our kids think critically. For example, my kids and I like to play this game called Fact, Fiction, or Belief. And I'll give them a scenario and they have to label it as fact, fiction, or belief. So for example, the grass is green, right? We're talking about 5 and 6 year olds. So the grass is green. Dad, that's a fact, right? Okay, yeah, that's correct. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are real, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are real. That's fiction. We know
it could
that's
be a
not
belief.
real.
Hold on.
No. No offense to the TMNT fans out there. Or then, okay, I'll tell them something like, cotton candy is the best food on earth. Dad, that's your
Fact.
belief.
Oh,
That's your opinion. And I said, you're right. That's my opinion. That's my belief. It doesn't make it fact. And so we'll do that on road trips, or even going down to the grocery store. But we don't. You never even have to bring up religion or religious beliefs, because once they learn to distinguish between fact, fiction, or belief, then when they get a little bit older and they'll hear a belief, they'll be able to determine, okay, that's just your opinion, man. And so that's what I've been doing. And luckily, I haven't had any issues at my kids' schools with this stuff. But I know that there's probably a lot of concerned parents who are wondering how to navigate that going forward.
Yeah, that's great. And that's also a trick that I think that we probably need to, a game that we need to play with a lot of adults right now, and just sort of help them learn the difference as well.
Yeah.
All right, we can jump into some questions here.
While we do that, Mickey, I'm 100% stealing that game with my kids. I have a 3 and a 4 year old, so that's brilliant. I like that. So.
Do it.
Okay. All right, first question, I guess I'll just direct it to you, but Mickey, you can answer too. How has the Freedom from Religion Foundation Action Fund spoken out against these bills, and what action are you looking to take if they become law?
Okay, so I'll do the first part, and since you're an attorney, I'll let you do the second part. All right, and I'll take Mickey, of course. So one thing that a lot of things that we've done, and I'm going to sing Mickey's praises here a little bit, or a lot probably, because we added Mickey to the team starting this legislative session, and Mickey has gone above and beyond just writing testimony, connecting with legislators in different states, sending out action alerts to mobilize our advocates on the ground, just getting the word out about how bad these bills are, and giving talking points and even providing questions to legislators where they can ask, bill sponsors or proponents of these nasty bills, pointed questions that get at really the heart of the issue. So we're doing a lot of that, a lot of legislator engagement, a lot of advocate engagement, led by Mickey in sheer numbers is just, throwing out a lot of testimony and letting his voice be heard, and it's great. So Mickey, I'll let you kind of weigh in on your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Ryan. And to echo that, we have a great team with Ryan Jane, Ryan Dudley, and myself. We have split up states, and we will track bills in those states. And when we get a legislative alert that there's going to be, for example, like a Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Kentucky that is scheduled for a committee meeting, then what we'll do is we'll read and analyze the bill. We'll write down potential questions. We'll write testimony in opposition to a bill like that. And then we will reach out specifically to the committee members via email and phone call, which next week we're going to go into more of that. So same type of citizen lobbying, emails, phone calls, that type of thing, if possible in person. We will make a connection with the lawmaker. We'll say, hey, if I were asking questions, here's what I would bring up. And then we'll tune in live and be able to watch the committee hearing from whichever state we're in. And it's really satisfying to see the questions that we propose to the lawmakers get asked, and it actually bring about some meaningful discussion and sometimes trip up the author. And that sometimes has, as Ryan's case, Ryan Dudley, has resulted in the defeat of some terrible legislation right here in Oklahoma. So while I don't do any of that work in Oklahoma, I'm working in Kentucky, Missouri, Nevada, Texas. Ryan and I split up Texas, Connecticut, Delaware, and then I can help fill in the gaps where possible. But once we fill out a testimony, then we can send that to our comms team, and they'll put together an article, and then they'll put together an action alert. And this is why it's so important for people to listen, to go to FFRF.org and then go to the action page and sign up for the action alerts, because you'll automatically receive an update if there's a bad bill, and sometimes a good bill, like making the minimum marriage 18 years old. That's one of the bills we're tracking in Connecticut. If that bill comes up for a committee hearing, you'll get an action alert, which will then give you the person you need to call with a sample script, and you can have your voice heard, because that really does make a difference, regardless of whether or not you think your legislator is going to vote for the way you want or against. Every one of those calls is tallied up and given to the legislator in a packet, and it will have an influence. It does make a difference in the outcome of their vote. I just had an experience with that today with power line setbacks. And so I heard from 3 people from Native American tribes here in Oklahoma, and that made a difference in how I decided to vote. And so we'll get into much more of the framework on how to be effective citizen lobbyists going forward, but I just want people to keep that in the back of their minds.
Yeah, with regard to action that FFRF can take, obviously with a lot of these really bad bills, we're going to try to take action if they're passed. We're working with a broad coalition often on a lot of these issues. We work with the ACLU, Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, and other groups. We've all kind of come together, pooling our resources to tackle, because as we know, this is a big effort across the country to do these bills. These are directly violating the Constitution and will need to go before the Supreme Court. So we're all going to have to work together, to fight these things. And in most cases, don't make it to the Supreme Court. So in the present, we can have an effect on stopping these if bad bills are passed. Like the Louisiana case is currently enjoined in a few different school districts, stopping them from implementing it. But we're always going to be looking to challenge these bills should they become bad laws.
Chris, to your point, I just want to say something. Being a relatively new hire, having started in January, I am so impressed with the Secular Coalition and how well organizations, free thought organizations, those nonprofits that protect that religious freedom of separation of church and state, how well that we're coordinated and working together, because it really does require all hands on deck. And so thanks to all of our all of our partners out there and friends who help fight this fight with us to protect the Constitution and people's religious freedoms. It really is a group effort.
Very well said, I think.
We'll do one more question here. Is the public support for bills like these really there? How are legislators able to overlook their constituents' concerns? I guess I'll push this to Mickey first, who probably has a better idea on public support with related to bills and legislators and constituents' concerns.
A lot of people, I would say, yes, putting out a social media but a post is good. But I would say diversify your advocacy. I went and spoke at a college last night, and out of about 25 students in the class, I asked how many people, by a show of hands, have ever written, called, or in some way connected with their elected officials. And out of the entire class, this is a U.S. government class, one person raised their hand. And so there is a strategy that I've developed and a framework, but it goes about consistency, contact knowledge, and knowing what to say and how far to push without going too far. There is a such thing as going too far. I've seen people really cross the lines and they sabotage their efforts, but we'll go into striking that perfect balance and getting your voice heard, but also having the lawmakers see you as a reliable source that they go to when they're seeking knowledge on a specific issue.
And I just want to weigh in one more time. I know we need to wrap up, but I do want to say to the first part of that question, is the public support there? I think I can answer that no. No, it's simply not. And I think we're seeing that, as Mickey addressed in the top of the show, in Texas, when Governor Abbott decided to push these voucher bills, it's been his pet project for such a long time. He effectively and outwardly primaried all Republicans who were against the bill. So there were a lot of rural Republicans in Texas who were against voucher expansion or even implementation because they simply did not have a private school in their rural community, and the public schools are a big, central focus of the community. So what he did was he ousted them and all the support that came with them, propped up their opponents by simply buying the votes, and now he's going to be able to get this legislation passed. So is the public support there? Largely, no, I don't think it is. But.
All right. And like we said, hopefully that leads to a lot of these bills being defeated as they should. So that'll wrap up this week's episode of FFRF's Ask an Atheist. A new episode of our broadcast TV show, Free Thought Matters, airs this weekend. FFRF co-presidents Annie Laurie Gaylor and Dan Barker will speak with religious trauma coach Janice Selby about her escape from fundamentalism and how she's now helping others.
And I just figured something is wrong here. I've bet on the wrong horse. God might be out there, but he's not in Christianity. And I gave myself permission to start exploring. And then eventually determined God wasn't anywhere. I didn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I drained the tub and found there was no baby in there.
You'll be able to watch that episode on TV stations around the country this weekend and soon on the FFRF YouTube channel.
And don't miss our weekly radio show, Free Thought Radio. This week, Dan and Annie Laurie will speak with Brian Reuter, president of Final Exit Network, which deals with end-of-life autonomy. Free Thought Radio can be found at ffrf.org/radio or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to check out the latest episode of We Dissent, the only podcast hosted exclusively by women constitutional lawyers discussing state-church separation. Listen and subscribe to We Dissent wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out online at we-dissent.org. Finally, if you want more information about the Freedom from Religion Foundation, you can check out our website at ffrf.org. If you're a member already, thank you. If not, please join us. See you next time on FFRF's Ask an Atheist.